Today we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be looking at the way in which race was regulated in Germany during the time when the National Socialists were in charge. Now, the National Socialists are called the Nazis, and I think this provides an interesting case study, one of the many interesting case studies about the problems that we encounter when we are obsessed with the concept of race, when we are obsessed with the concepts of phenomes, of physical characteristics that determine our access to all sorts of things. And so we probably won't have time, although we perhaps should, to look at, in a bit more detail, at issues of race in North America, particularly of blackness, and both of these stories, the story of German attitudes to Jews before and during the Second World War, and of the mass incarceration, enslavement of Africans by European entrepreneurs and colonialists and capitalists. Both of these appalling epochs in our history, in European history, are some of the reasons why people like us don't really like referring to race. Many people, I'm not the only person who kind of insists that there is only one race, and that is the human race, and that linguistic and physical and cultural diversity is an important and beautiful thing. But what I would like to do is, in this lecture, we're going to be looking at the way in which Germans in, I think it was 1935, wrote and passed legislation which defined who were Germans, who were Jews, and who were of mixed race. And we're going to go through this one by one. And so let's go into full screen now as we begin to do this. We're going to go into full screen now. And some of these ideas were developed in the late 1800s when a subdiscipline of anthropology called physical anthropology was obsessed with documenting the range of physical features that anthropologists encountered when they began to do field work. This is an approach to anthropology which has been long discredited. Okay, so we're going to go through this one by one. So I think there are 5 categories determined by German law about who were Germans, who were of mixed ancestry, second grade, who were mixed ancestry or first grade, and who were Jewish and who were fully Jewish. And so the first category were Germans. And so you will see here citizens who were permitted to marry and who were not permitted to marry. Some marriages with mixed race people were possible only through authorized permission, and a German was not able to marry certain categories of non-Germans. And so that is the first category of German ancestry, when both of your grandparents are fully German. After that, you would be given certain privileges. But there was another category, and that is this, that it is possible that everyone has 4 grandparents, and that one of them was Jewish. And because of that, your parents, one of your 2 parents were half Jewish, and if that was the case, it would be possible to marry a full-blooded German, and that these children were seen as being of German blood. And these people who were of mixed race, to use their term, or mixed blood, there were people that they were permitted and not permitted to marry. So they were able to marry others with this proportion of German blood. And so this is called Germans of mixed ancestry of the 2nd grade. So they belong to the German people's community and can become a citizen of the Reich. Okay, but there was a second type of mixed race person, and they were people who their grandparents, one of them was Jewish. Both sets of grandparents, one of them was Jewish, meaning that both of their parents were half Jewish. And so children were perceived to be themselves half Jewish. And this meant that if they were to be married, there is only a certain number of people that they could be married to, and that their children would be classified in different ways. And they range from being classified as mixed ancestry, or they would be classified as Jews. They would be classified as Jews. And so the blue number, the blue colour there, denotes being classified as Jews, whereas the red crosses there mean that they are classified as German. So, after this, there is a range of the Nazis classified Germans in certain ways, mixed race in 2 separate ways, and Jews were also classified in 2 separate categories. So if you had 4 grandparents and only one of them was German and 3 of them were Jewish, then one of your parents was fully Jewish and the other parent was half Jewish, then you would be considered to be a Jew. You would only be a quarter German, and that meant that you would be prohibited from marrying a German, but you were permitted to marry a Jew, and your children would be classified as Jews. Lastly, if all of your grandparents were Jewish, then marriage with a German was prohibited. Marriage with a German who was only a quarter Jewish was prohibited, and all of your children would be are classified as Jews, and this gives us a list of so this is a good summary of the way in which a racialized thinking. This is how Europeans, how Germans at a particular time and place. This is where their obsession with the idea of blood and the purity of blood, the way that proportions can be counted, we can put numbers on them, and the way that they made laws that were based on these concepts, these ideas of race that had numbers on them. And so this is just to summarize. So there was German-blooded, and they were regarded as German. They belonged to the German race, and they were given citizenship. If you were an eighth Jewish, you were considered to be German-blooded. You belonged to the German race, and you were given citizenship. If you were a quarter Jewish, you only partly you only partly belonged to the German race and nation, and you were given citizenship. And the same is true for a 3/8 and half Jewish. But if you were 3/4 Jewish, you were not approved to be. You would not have German citizenship in the Reich, in the political system that existed in Germany from the 1930s when Adolf Hitler took charge. So what is interesting is that there were a number of Jews who are part Jews who were classified. They were part of this mixed race crossbreed category, Category 1, Category 2, and during the Second World War, a number of famous, notable Nazis were, some of them were Nazis, others were part of the German army, which didn't necessarily agree with all of the agenda of the Nazis, but there were a number of individuals who joined the military, who were considered to be citizens, full citizens, and of German blood despite their ancestry. Okay, so this is an example of one of the ways that being deeply invested in the idea of blood and race, this is one of the directions that thinking like this can lead you into. So throughout Southeast Asia, for example, there have been times when people have been very concerned about the growth of Chinese economic power and have sought to marginalize Chinese, ethnic Chinese away from political life, from commercial life, from public life. And this is despite the fact that, for example, if you read Chris Baker, his history of Thailand, you will see some very interesting data about the significance, the Chinese ancestry of some members of the Chakri dynasty. It is important to mention that Thailand's racial chauvinism in the 1930s was led by a Field Marshal, Phipon Songkhram, who himself was at least half, I think he was Hokkien, he was at least half Chinese. And actually his nickname was Black because he had distinctively Chinese features. And so, despite the fact of this person being a Lukjin, a person of Chinese ancestry, it was this person who, after leading the coup and assuming political power as early as the 1930s, it was this person of mixed race himself, someone whose family originally came from Chinese-speaking parts of what is now southwest China. This racial chauvinist was someone whose parents had undergone assimilation into Bangkok commercial and political life. And so I hope you've enjoyed this case study of the problems with being deeply invested in the concept of race.